Hi, this is SciFun. The internet is a wonderful place. In my opinion, the Polish-speaking part is great, and thanks to AI, I can bring you some content in a slightly more accessible way. So, without further ado, let's get started. Let's start with a film that has been on my list of favorites for a long time. I'm talking about SciFun's video about flat earthers. I have to admit, I had heard about them long before discovering this video, but this particular piece brought me back down to earth in a funny way. Not a flat one, of course.
Is the flat Earth a hypothesis or perhaps a belief system in a wide range? A test of those telling, among others, that the place we live on is a disk surrounded by an undefined dome, that we are at the center of the universe, that gravity does not exist, and that we are attracted to the Earth by electromagnetism. We have also never flown into space, and satellites do not exist. The moon shines with its own light, the sun is inside our dome, meaning it can be closer to Poland than to Australia. Our sun is therefore tiny and moves by the power of magic. Australia is the size of Africa. Beyond the edge of the disk, it's unknown what lies there, because the entire Antarctica, which is ring-shaped, is guarded by armed evil people, and that all these things are part of a gigantic hidden conspiracy. If we wanted to systematically classify the flat Earth among other such daring examples of human intellect, one version of the flat Earth, we can place it in this area, and the non-religious variant here, right next to the GMO conspiracy, the moon landing hoax, free energy, climate change denial, HARP, or chemtrails.
A great summary of what this movement is and what it believes in. To give you a bit more insight into who SciFun is, he's a Polish YouTuber who specializes in creating science-related content. He explains complex topics in an accessible and sometimes humorous way. I'll include a link to his channel in the description.
The topic is quite extensive, so I thought I would divide it into several episodes like a mini-series. And I see it as simply taking various arguments of this movement and just analyzing them. And I would start with this film because it is quite popular, and among all the messages about the flat Earth that I received, this particular film was mentioned the most often. So let's begin. I'll summarize for you. The first key argument presented in this film, which concerns artificial horizons. Well, airplanes are equipped with gyroscopic artificial horizons. The gyroscope it maintains a constant axis of rotation relative to, let's say, the distant stars. So, if an airplane on a spherical Earth flies, let's say, from here to there, yes, it will rotate by 90 degrees on the planet, the gyroscope. That will be flying with it in the cabin, won't do that. It simply won't rotate. But these devices, the artificial horizons, are equipped with special correction systems, which simply do not allow this error to occur so that the artificial horizon fulfills its function. However, Mr. Murphy claims that there are no such correctors, because they are not needed, as the Earth is flat. But you won't believe where he got this conclusion from. So first he says that a pilot told him that there is a lot of electronics there that compensates for this error. Then Mr. Murphy says that he went to an artificial horizon factory and asked, "Is there any electronics in the horizons?" They answered him that no, they are mechanical devices. And based on this, Mr. Murphy concluded that there are no compensators. It didn't occur to him that the compensators are mechanical, that they must be mechanical, because to compensate for the action of a force, you need to use another force, not electronics. Avionics, Instruments and Onboard Systems. A nearly 1,000-page, highly technical tome published by the Air Force Officers Higher School in Dublin, also known as the Orlan School, Department of Avionics and Control Systems. It seems possible that they might know something about this topic. 3-degree gyroscope. Freedom with a vertical axis, the main one, maintaining a constant position in inertial space, changes its position relative to the Earth. It became necessary to correct the vertical position of the main axis of the gyroscope, i.e., its continuous adjustment to the desired position using special follow-up systems. This is the device, a simple mechanism indicating the direction of the gravitational force. This all means that the aircraft gyroscope does not get lost because it knows the direction of the gravitational force.
Here you can see SciFun's approach to the topic. He tackles it very methodically and thoroughly. He doesn't settle for just a superficial understanding, but dives deep into it and squeezes out every detail.
It flies straight. Then it should fly off into space.
Since the Earth is round, a flying plane should periodically lower its nose in such a way that it simply doesn't fly out of our orbit. It so happens that I have a pilot friend, and I asked him this question. We met again a week later, and he still couldn't explain it to me. And he talked about it with his colleagues, who also couldn't explain it to him. You can also look it up on the internet and see for yourselves.
How it happens. Mareczek? How do we fly and not end up in space?
We want to deal with the ring, some gyroscope, and damn, let's throw it out. Why do we need it, Captain Split 49? Do you want to try going to Teterboro?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like...
We'll often see inserts like this. Some might say it's an attempt to ridicule flat earthers, but some of their theories are simply indefensible.
I don't know if it needs to be added, but maybe I'll add that, besides the fact that they work. The artificial horizon and altimeter. If someone insisted on flying to space with an airplane, the thinning atmosphere would stop them, because neither aircraft engines nor wings work in a thin atmosphere, let alone in a vacuum. A note about gyroscopes. Theoretically, a very simple powered gyroscope should demonstrate the rotation of the planet. And some flat Earth enthusiasts conduct such experiments, and I really commend them for it, because they are doing at least something more than just staring at YouTube and calling it research. Unfortunately, their gyroscopes don't budge, so of course they rejoice that the Earth is flat. We'll explain this in a moment, but for now. What is more likely? That we are living in an unimaginably monumental conspiracy, costing trillions of dollars, monthly to bribe. All the scientists, engineers, technicians, surveyors, geographers, teachers. In fact, the entire world, all space agencies, airlines, transport companies, simply in a conspiracy that permeates absolutely the entire world and all its fields of life. And for hundreds of years? And that it is a conspiracy that is being maintained at all? It's unclear for what reason, because it doesn't bring any tangible benefits to anyone. What benefits does it bring? What is it for? Flat earthers, dear ones, what benefit do you get from this? That you already know this, that you are no longer in it. How much has it improved? Your life? I'm curious because I'm not. I'm curious how much I'm losing monthly, just like that. I don't know, 100? Maybe I'm losing 1,000 zlotys or something.
Or is it perhaps more likely that you're on the wrong side of the Gaussian distribution?
When I first heard the arguments of flat earthers, I should have asked myself this very question. It would have saved me a lot of time analyzing other claims, but in the end, searching for real answers taught me something as well. A win-win situation.
But don't get me wrong, your coma is completely fine here and absolutely appropriate. But it's not necessary for us to reach any conclusions here, because we also have arguments that are simply as if stronger. A simple gyroscope won't show the movement of the planet because it's burdened with too much friction. Here, even a cable is causing some resistance. But there is another experiment that directly proves the rotation of the planet. I mean, there are plenty of them, but here we might mention one that is also quite well known, and that is the pendulum. Foucault, a properly constructed and operated Foucault pendulum under the right conditions is capable of demonstrating not only the rotation of the planet, but also that it is a sphere and the latitude of the point on this sphere where it was set in motion. I emphasize the words properly constructed and appropriate conditions because this, for example, is a sad joke of an experiment and has no chance of success.
I actually had the chance to observe this experiment once at the physics department of a Polish university. It's a cool experience, especially when someone is there to explain everything. However, I wouldn't try to recreate this experiment at home.
But here, the chances are definitely there. A 25 kilo lead sphere, which combines a large mass with a small volume, minimizing air resistance. A thin string, also minimizing resistance, properly mounted on the ceiling, the whole setup suspended 5 floors higher, and everything in a closed room without wind. The effect demonstrates the rotation of the planet in accordance with calculations and determines the latitude with great accuracy. This is proof that the Earth is not a stationary disk, but a rotating sphere. And even if this flat Earth disk were rotating, the Foucault pendulum would show completely different results. And it would never show that around Europe it rotates in the opposite direction than around Australia, and at the equator it doesn't rotate at all. And that's exactly how this pendulum behaves. Because the Earth is a sphere. And this is proof of the fallacy of this hypothesis. And since even one piece of evidence is enough to reject a hypothesis, we could basically end here because it's a closed case. The Foucault pendulum of lead. The sphere shatters the entire flat Earth hypothesis into pieces. And there are, of course, many more pieces of evidence that refute it, and we will mention them later. But let's move on, because another argument is coming up. Well, Mr. Marfin is amazed that the Earth spins, and for example, when wet, a tennis ball also spins, and then drops fly off it. So, around the Earth's equator, there should be such a bulge of water. It should push all the water from the entire planet there and flood the lands. The forces at play in this case, the size of the planet, the mass of water, and the elevation of the lands, do not allow for such a buildup of water at the equator. But note, this phenomenon occurs in the spherical Earth's atmosphere. The Earth's atmosphere is thicker at the equator precisely because of the rotation of the spherical planet.
It's interesting that some things we can easily observe on a microscopic scale can also be seen on a larger scale, and vice versa. However, as we can see, sometimes it's difficult to reconcile the two, or sometimes we simply don't have enough knowledge.
Next, we watch about the North Star and how when we set a long exposure on the camera, somewhere there at high latitudes we will get these beautiful circular star trails. But that's not all Mr. Murphy talks about, because the Earth also orbits around the Sun and the Gal. Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again. So we were talking about the circular star trails. And now the problem is, Mr. Murphy says that after all, besides the fact that the Earth spins, at a certain speed it also orbits around the Sun, at a greater speed and at an even greater speed. The entire solar system orbits the center of the galaxy. So from the combination of these three movements, it should result in something completely chaotic. And there shouldn't be those beautiful circles in long exposure, just some complete chaos. Imagine that the Earth does not spin on its own axis. Let's remove this rotational movement and see what happens. Because if after such a stop in spinning, the stars move quickly across the night sky, then they are right. Okay, the Earth is now rigid like on gyroscopes and orbits the Sun without rotating on its own axis. This young, handsome boy is now the Earth, and the ball is the Sun. The night now lasts half a year, and the night sky constantly shows the same image. Why the same? Well, it's easy to notice that the face is constantly turned in one direction. The planet does not rotate relative to the stars, so it constantly sees the same ones. So what will we see in a several-hour-long exposure from the surface of such a planet? We will see stationary points of stars.
Okay, this is one experiment that anyone can easily try at home.
These circular paths are solely the result of rotational movement and the orbital movement around the Sun or the center of the galaxy. It changes nothing. Indeed, the planet moves from one side of the Sun to the other, but even if such a long exposure lasted half a year, the distances to the stars are too vast to detect any shifts with the naked eye during such a night. Astronomers searched for these shifts for centuries and only detected them in the 19th century. This phenomenon is called stellar parallax. Shifts resulting from galactic motion are also extremely difficult to detect. What we see with the naked eye in the form of these circles is solely the rotation of the planet and us on it in different directions in the sky, because that's how we experience its rotation. There is a very specific reason why flat earthers don't like these images. Star trails. They don't like any pictures of the night sky at all, because these images directly prove the planet's roundness and its rotation. If you take a flat disk of the Earth, whether it's stationary or rotating, or the universe rotates above it or its dome rotates, it doesn't matter. From every point on the flat disk, you see exactly the same sky. From every place on the disk, you can observe the same parts of the sky. This is completely inconsistent with observations, because on the spherical Earth we live on, in the southern hemisphere, you see a completely different sky than in the northern hemisphere. In the next segment, Mr. Murphy spouts typical anti-scientific nonsense about how it's not worth trusting calculations and the theory that you should take everything with your own reasoning and sight, which means simply relying on so-called common sense. Unfortunately, we've already seen in the last few minutes how much this common sense, at least Mr. Murphy's, is worth. But let's continue, because another argument is coming up. Actually, this is the beginning of a whole litany of arguments about the horizon, or rather nonsense about the horizon, because flat earthers claim that on a spherical planet, objects should disappear beyond the horizon, and they don't. Of course they do. Being an average height person and standing on some flat, expansive terrain, we can see a distance of just under 5 kilometers.
And everything that is further away starts to slowly hide below the horizon. And everything would always be perfectly visible if it weren't for the fact that Earth has an atmosphere. The atmosphere causes us to sometimes see things that are beyond the horizon. Sometimes even far beyond the horizon, like in this situation so unique that it was even shown on television. An entire coastal city visible as a mirage, yet it is far beyond the horizon. So what do flat earthers do? They choose this unrepresentative sample and say, look, here's the proof, it's always like this. No, you don't take an extreme situation or one related to other variables to draw general conclusions about a single variable, cherry-picking the beloved strategy of manipulators. But what's happening? Here Mr. Murphy himself admits that he is aware of the phenomenon of light refraction, but he applies his reliable method of dismissing evidence without any basis. Is there such a phenomenon? Well, there is, but I don't care, says Mr. Murphy, because the Earth is flat.
I love this kind of reasoning. With this approach, you can prove anything, literally anything.
In every film of this type, you will find ships that are right on the edge of the horizon. On YouTube, there are, of course, also plenty of videos showing ships and objects partially below the horizon. But those films don't interest our flat earthers. Or they claim that you can't see just half of the sail, but the entire sailboat, and the rest is hidden by waves. Or that the sailboat simply sank. So, what do we see here? Maybe it's a submarine, not a ship? Maybe it's the sunken ruins of the Mayans? If we really want to limit ourselves to YouTube, here's a building. Turning torso in Malmo. It's constructed in such a way that it works like a ruler with a scale. Here it is seen from different distances. You can count the scales. And here we will rescale the one seen from a greater distance and align the scales to remove the perspective effect. And what's happening here? Call the Swedes. Their building is sinking.
That adding of explanations. That's nothing, because flat earthers have added an entire mythical cosmology to their disk with the sun, the moon, stars, and other planets, which aren't planets at all because they aren't spherical planets. No, who told you that? They are like little stamps, like postage stamps stuck to the dome or flying around outside the dome like confetti. And do you know why they did that? Because they heard, or someone told them, that 2200 years ago there was this guy, Eratosthenes, who already debunked them back then, so they came up with this way to get around it. But all they did was sink deeper into an even bigger swamp of absurdity. But about Eratosthenes and all that cosmology, maybe in the next episode, because not now.
Why do you think the Earth is flat? Well, because we don't believe in anything, we can't verify and examine ourselves. Okay, and what about gravity? Because it doesn't work on a disk. And there's no gravity. So why do objects fall to the Earth? Because they are heavy. Okay, what force governs this? Electromagnetism, which attracts everything? How's it work? It's unknown, but probably something related to electrons. Alright, has anyone seen the edge of the disk? No, because it's a conspiracy, and on YouTube they say you're not allowed to go to Antarctica. So you haven't seen either the edge or the connection of the disk with the dome? No. But you're relying only on your own evidence. Because on YouTube they say someone went and was chased away from Antarctica. So anecdotal evidence. Yes, because we do our own research and don't believe in that nonsense from science. Alright? And how do you actually know that the center of the disk is the Arctic and not Antarctica? And it's the Arctic, that is the border, being guarded. Or we saw such a map on a flag and it fits. Alright, let's go back to Antarctica. Why don't you film this patrolling and the stopping of this entire armada of ships and soldiers? Because in your model, the Antarctic coastline is about 100,000 kilometers long. And that requires thousands of ships and hundreds of thousands of people on patrols, thousands of patrol bases. Maybe it would be worth filming. And we just know that it doesn't make sense. So not only do you not have proof, but you also don't want to have it. I'm telling you, all the evidence is on YouTube. Alright, has anyone seen the entire disk from above? No, because no one has flown that high, and besides, you can't, because you'd hit the dome. There is one video on YouTube. So how do you know that the Earth is a circular disk, and not, for example, a hexagon? Very funny. Or a square, or a sunflower. No, it's definitely a circular disk. But how can you be sure, since no one has flown that high, no one has been to Antarctica, and no one has seen it? The dome. Because that's what they say on YouTube. But you rely only on your own evidence. Well, that's exactly the proof, because we do research, I told you. Alright, why do you think it's all a giant conspiracy? Because the whole world is lying about it. But you rely, I remember you have proof on YouTube, right?
Another series of great questions that should make a light bulb go off above your head. I have to admit, I sometimes struggle with asking simple questions and tend to tackle problems in a roundabout way.
Let's return to Mr. Murphy, because there are photos of the Salar de Uyuni salt flat in Bolivia, a large flat area that sometimes fills with rainwater to a shallow depth. As a result, it creates a beautiful mirror spanning tens of kilometers. And Mr. Murphy is amazed that such a large surface can maintain a water mirror. How is it possible, since the Earth is supposedly a sphere, because the water should clearly be flowing off to the sides? I don't know if this needs explaining, but it is the result of two things. The first is the shape of the planet, and the second is that mysterious force, Mr. Murphy, that keeps you in that chair. That's the first thing. The second is the horizon. Far, far away, you can see the other end. 100 miles away, Murphy rejoices. Well, not really, that's not the other end. Those are mountains, partially visible, protruding from beneath the horizon. Here is the horizon, and here are the peaks, of distant elevations. There's nothing here. And now, abracadabra, we make a side shot. In this case, we see the peaks of these mountains, and here we don't see them anymore because they are further away, or there's a valley there. Of course, there are plenty of photos of this place on the internet. A whole lot. Alright, then there's a several-minute tirade about how NASA modifies photos. And now some bystander who is watching this might be surprised that someone is able to, in their mind, transition through a cause and effect relationship from point A, NASA modifies photos, to point B, the Earth is flat. But I don't think they think that way. I don't think so. I think all this defamation of NASA and all the space agencies has its specific reasons, and I will talk about them shortly. Of course, NASA modifies photos, just like anyone who has ever had the pleasure of dealing with astronomy or photography. Most of those beautiful shots of nebulae, galaxies, or planets that you know from albums and films are compositions. Such an image is composed of several source photos of the same object to bring out colors or details. Colors are added to the photos, contrasts are enhanced, and a whole lot of other things are done to make them look nicer but still faithful. However, the scientific basis is always the originals. All these accusations directed at NASA are, of course, completely understandable. NASA and all other space agencies provide direct evidence of the planet's roundness. And that's why they are attacked. That's also why rational thinking, logic, mathematics, geometry, and scientific methodology are attacked. If the evidence contradicts us, so much the worse for the evidence. A method as old as the world. By the way, Do you know what the Andromeda Galaxy looks like through an amateur telescope? It looks like this, for example. In no telescope on Earth will you see Andromeda like that. Not even in the Hubble. And do you know why that is? Do you know why that is? Well, and I'll tell you. Just quietly. I'll speak into the microphone. Galaxies. They are black and white. At least to the human eye, so sometimes it's enhanced. They even publish tutorials on how to do it with their originals, which are stored in terabytes in their open archives, ready to download. Well, indeed.
I have to admit, watching the process of modifying these photos is impressive. It's amazing what people are capable of doing. Here we have plenty of comments from Polish flat earthers. In short, shouting that the Earth is flat, claiming the author sold out, doesn't know anything, or that it's just a theory. I think everyone has encountered this kind of approach and argumentation at least once in their life, especially on the internet. That's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I've watched it multiple times myself. I'll include a link in the description to this channel and this specific video in case anyone wants to see the original. I can see that the translation isn't perfect, but I'm still impressed with the result. I'll try to make the next videos even better. Take care, everyone, and see you next time.